The MASC Blue Book is good for assessing first graders, and after you've made sure that you've printed out the booklet pages as well as the recording sheets, you'll be able to start with question 1. Let me scroll down to question 1. Each of these questions is designed to be read aloud to students. You can follow the basic script. So for number 1, I would just read, please count out loud how many blocks or counters are on the table. You're going to have pre-counted 32 and spread them out. You don't have to line them up or anything. And I would recommend not using blocks that have to be snapped together, because that can just take way too much time for the student, even if you tell them not to snap them together. Once the student has finished counting and you've observed whether they've got one-to-one correspondence and tracking, you'll be able to then ask question 2. So how many are there? And if the student starts over from 1 and tries to recount all of them, then it's likely that you're seeing someone who still needs to work on cardinality. Moving on to question 3, you're going to just shift the blocks around and ask the same question. How many are there now? And you'll be able to get a sense, if they start counting from 1, that they may not have conservation of quantity. When you get to number 4, you're going to be able to notice whether the student is actually moving 2 counters when they say 2 and moving 2 more when they say 4, or if they're just moving 1 counter for each time they say 2 or 4. That's likely to tell you that they know about rote counting by 2s, but that they don't necessarily have a strong concept of what it means to count by 2s. On number 5, you're going to put 3 more blocks on the table. I try not to make it very obvious that I've added 3 more, but the student knows I've put some more on. And then I ask the student to put the blocks into groups of 10. And then when they've finished doing that, and of course there are going to be some leftovers in another pile, then ask how many are there now? And you'll be able to observe whether the student has to start counting from 1 or whether they have some more sophisticated strategy of dealing with the 10, 20, 30. When you get to questions 6 and 7, these are word problems, and after the student has answered each word problem, be sure to ask probing questions to follow up and find out how they were able to figure them out. On 6 and 7, I make sure that I've covered up or actually put away the blocks. I don't want the students relying on the blocks unless I find somebody who just can't solve them any other way, and then I'll ask them if they want to use the blocks. And the students are not using paper and pencil for 6 and 7. When we slide down to the next set of, oh, by the way, when you're done with questions 1 through 7, make sure that you've made notes in the margins and in the comments area. At the end of the assessment, once you've sent the student back to class, you'll be able to go back and try circling which of these levels you think was the highest level you saw students doing during questions 1 through 7. And just make your best guess. Then when we slide down to the next section, questions 8 and 9 are about having students count forwards and then try and read numbers and then tell you the number that comes right after them. When you get to question 10, 11, and 12, students are going to be counting backwards, and the numbers in the brackets are where you can tell them to stop. They don't have to go to 0 on number 11. And then on number 12, you'll be asking things like, what number is this? The numbers are printed in the booklet. And then when the student answers 9, then you're able to say, what comes right before 9? And of course, you're looking for 8. You'll be able to see when the student starts having difficulty with this. By the time they get up to these larger numbers of 236 and 600, they may be struggling. You don't need to keep going once you see that a student's struggling. If they're having trouble with 31, then you don't need to keep pressuring all the way up to into the hundreds. Number 13 is number identification. You'll be showing the students the numbers in the booklet. Number 14, again, is in the booklet, and The way I do this question is I'll start with a piece of white paper covering up all of the dots, and then I'll slide it down so we're just looking at the first 4 dots, and I'll just say, here are 4 dots. And then I'll slide the paper one more row, and I'll say, and here are 10 more dots. Then I'll ask, so how many dots are there altogether? And you get to observe and record whether the student had to go back and count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc., or whether they were able to use some more advanced strategy to put the 10 and 4 together. Once they've got 14, I'm going to slide the paper down one more row and ask the same question. Now how many dots are there? And again, we'll be able to watch and see what happens with the student. If the student counts from 1 on that particular question, I probably won't go on and ask about the last 2 rows. But if they're using some effective strategy for the first 3 rows, then I will keep sliding it down and just say, and now how many are there? And now how many are there? Let's go back to the recording sheet. When you're done with number 14, you'll be able to then move on to asking the basic fact questions. Typically, I ask all of the questions, the addition questions all the way through, and then go back and ask the subtraction questions. If you're noticing that the student is starting to struggle in the addition questions, you may decide not to go all the way to goal 9, but just drop back and ask the subtraction questions for the goals that the students seem to be doing okay with. And that's the end of the first grade Blue Book assessment. Have fun, enjoy this with your students, and remember that at the end there's a chart that you need to type up saying what happened with each question and then which ones the student had trouble with and why you think they had trouble. Make sure you have all of that ready for our class where this is due. Thanks. Bye.